The doctor hesitates for a minute. I need to check on a few things, he said, then asked if he could call me back. Folks, for those of you who didn't get to listen to last week's message, please go back and do so, as today's message is a continuation of God's Prozac, Following the Path, Part 9. Also, let me welcome you. We are so glad to have you join us for this 10th week in this series. I know you will be blessed by its content, at least in the end. True to his word, the very next day, the doctor did call with this reply. Currently, he said, DNA testing takes about 6 months of continuous work, making it unfeasible for most organizations. Because it is such a new science, there is no law enforcement labs testing for DNA at the present, not even the FBI sophisticated laboratory. Now, think about this, folks, and how far DNA has evolved since this first case. However, the doctor continued, I really want a DNA case to be tested in criminal court. With your permission, the doctor said, and for the sake of keeping chain of custody, I will send one of my technicians to receive the fetus and bring it back to the lab here in Burlington. I guess I was speechless for a moment because he finished saying, also, our people has agreed to pay all expenses for the testing. Now, folks, that is a lot of money. Neighbor, a major hurdle had just been overcome by this second miracle. The first, God put me in touch with the right person at SLED headquarters. However, as with any other undertaking of this magnitude, we would need the hand of God and even more miraculous undertakings to see it through. Our next hurdle was getting a court order to draw blood from the victim's father, the perpetrator, or the suspected perpetrator. Attempting to explain DNA to the issuing judge was difficult to say the least. My plea ended with him saying, I don't know what you're talking about, so I'm going to have to trust that you do. And with that, we left the judge's chambers with a court order in hand to have blood drawn from the suspect. Friend, most people never come in close contact with law enforcement and the functions of law enforcement or any other part of the criminal justice system. Adding to this, other than divorces or adoptions, most law-abiding citizens will have no idea of all the functions of the family court, so neither court. Never needing to be involved with the penal side of either one of these courts is a good thing. So don't feel left out, feel blessed. On the criminal court side, the defendant has a right to a speedy trial. You saw it on TV or maybe Dateline. Also, the defendant's attorney has a right to a copy of all evidence against his client, called discovery. Don't send it to him and he'll get a discovery rule served on you. So just go ahead and copy and give it to him. However, with the most damning evidence in the making, we needed all parties, including judges and attorneys, to agree to a delay or postponement. Criminal court was usually the easiest to get a continuance, gave time for the defendant's attorney to put together a defense, not to mention getting paid. They wouldn't say that, but I did. Family court, however, is a different story as for deadlines to show cause. To take a child into protected custody, all law enforcement has to show at the 10-day hearing is probable cause. However, the mandatory 30-day hearing was an evidentiary hearing or factual hearing, meaning the judge would have to be presented with proof as to endangerment so as to keep the child from being placed back into the home. Thank God, in South Carolina, there was one other option which trumps all other mandates, and that is agreements between the parties and approved by the judge. Selling such an agreement to the court was usually not that difficult. To the family court, Judge Robert Burnside always ruled in favor of protecting the children. However, the defense attorney must also approve and get his client to agree. To help sell the state's position, this proposition was made to the defense attorney. We can charge your client based on the statements we have or the fact she was a 13-year-old pregnant child. If we do that, your client will then be arrested and possibly sit in jail until such time the solicitor calls the case for trial, which incidentally could be months. Or we can all agree to wait on the DNA test results to come back, followed by the disposition in criminal court before moving forward in family court. Friend, let me stop right here and change to another real-life scenario, one long before this case took place. Do you realize it is not unusual for God's plans to consist of many working parts and many different people? Let me give you proof first with Isaiah announcing the birth of Jesus Christ almost 800 years before he was born. Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14. Therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. Then hundreds of years passed before John the Baptist said these words in John's first chapter, 27th verse. He it is who coming after me is preferred before me, whose shoes latchet I am not worthy to unloose. Next, for it all to come together, Mary and Joseph had to also buy into the miraculous conception of baby Jesus. Listen, folks, even the stars had to align as part of God's awesome plan. It was not by accident or happenstance the 12 disciples were in the exact right place at the right time. So Jesus could choose each one for their purpose, including Judas Iscariot. Yes, Judas was just as much of God's plan leading to the cross as any other component. Lastly, let me mention Joseph, not Mary's husband Joseph, but another Joseph, Joseph of Arimathea, donor of Jesus' tomb. Let's take a quick look at just a few verses which identifies this Joseph and his purpose in that place and time. Matthew chapter 27, verse 57 through 60, three short verses. Now when evening had come, there was a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who himself had also become a disciple of Jesus. This man went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate commanded the body be given to him. When Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped it in clean linen cloth and laid it in his new tomb, which he had hewed out of rock. Now, folks, he made this tomb before Jesus was ever crucified. And he rolled a large stone against the door of the tomb and departed. Friend, without God putting this Joseph at the right place and the right time in history, there would not have been any tomb, especially an empty one on the third day. Getting back to the God-appointed day and time for our DNA case to be brought before the criminal court. Yes, the DNA test results came back as identifying the father as the paternal donor. A suppression hearing was now before the circuit court to have the DNA results excluded as evidence from our case. Everyone was present, including the doctor, scientist, and lab technician from Raleigh, North Carolina. Folks, a biggie was about to go down in history. The defense argued not to let the DNA test results into evidence as there was no case law to support DNA testing. He continued his client was at a disadvantage as there was no defense he could offer as to such an unknown, unproven, hocus-pocus test. Now, this is all God, folks. Judge Cobb responded with, he would be inclined to agree with the defense, except he was at a judge training, a seminar a few weeks prior, where the doctor, the scientist there, gave in-depth information concerning DNA testing. It may be in the early stages, the doctor said, as far as criminal cases go, but this has been in the process and in the making for years. Now, knowing what I know from attending this seminar, the judge concluded, I am going to let it in. Folks, I wanted to shout and praise God and do a dance right in the courtroom. And with that, the defendant pled guilty. We didn't even have a trial. Friend, let me end a different way this week. God has a plan and a path for all of us to follow. It is not always the easiest path, but it's the best path. Please join us next week for part 10 of this series, Getting Off Course. Until we meet again, may God bless you and yours.